There you go. So off you go.
Okay, so today we've got the session with Gavin and I hosting it. I'm going to facilitate the questions and facilitate the session. My name is Fraser Morrison, and I work with Gavin closely to do this. And the session today is hosted by Fuel Change. And Fuel Change is about engaging the next generation within workforces to drive that really strong transition, that positive transition into net zero. Their belief is it's very much about the young generation and how we engage them that's going to actually create the change in the future. The session is recorded today because there's some people not going to make it and they want to go back and watch it. We're also going to record the Q&A because sometimes some of the questions are really interesting, but if it goes a bit wrong, we can always cut a bit out. Yeah, so not that it go wrong, but please put any questions you've got in the chat. It's a really interactive session. Ooh, that's my kids calling me. So it's going to be a really interesting session. Gavin, can you just flick this screen forward? Yeah, I mean, I've introduced myself. We work with companies to try and get brands out there. But Gavin, this is about Gavin. His experience and love for the sustainability, the decarbonization of the world. You're right. I think you all know that, right? He's pretty unique. He's a bit of a force in this, and his passion is something that affects everybody. I'm really looking forward to this session, and the more interactive you are, the more questions you ask, the better it is for him and for everybody else. So, Gavin, over to you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Fraser, for that glowing introduction. I appreciate that, and thanks everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be meeting with you. Today's conversation is designed to be a lively conversation where I propose to ask you guys your opinions. So as we're going along, I want to hear your views in the chat. And at the end of the session, we're going to spend some quality time going over that and discussing that. And we're going to then write a reflections piece on this, because I think it's important that as many voices as possible are heard. There's a lot of valuable experience and innovation and ideas joining us today. So we want to make sure everyone's voice gets heard. So the purpose of today is looking at the convergence of sustainability and communications in a way that drives cultural change and actually drives the net zero transition. And there has to be an outcome of this, which is we have to ultimately make businesses better as a consequence, creating a more engaged workforce. And ultimately, let's not forget why we're doing this. It is about tackling the climate crisis. Now, there are other outcomes as well, but these are some of the key discussion points of today that I want you all to think about as you're reflecting on the conversation. So the world today, well, where are we? Everyone's got a view. For me, it begins with, we're seeing unprecedented extreme weather events. And I don't need to go and do the whole David Attenborough piece. You're all aware of what's going on yourselves. But essentially, businesses are being disrupted by extreme weather events. So there's business impact happening. We can't keep prioritising profit ahead of all the other things that are happening. And it's kind of ironic. I put this together a few days ago. A few days ago, we had a different Prime Minister. So I wanted to draw attention to some of the decisions that have been taken in the political world. We saw the fracking ban lifted by the previous Prime Minister, and then the new, there's now been a change of administration, and now it's banned again, which is great. But that highlights ping pong politics. It's a phrase that Ray and I were chatting earlier on about, this notion that there are serious things going on in the world, and yet transient short-term administrations seem to be able to have quite significant impacts on this. And I do want to invite you guys to share your views and opinions on how we create a more long-term view of how we're going to live our lives in business and society. The other thing to point out was that last year at COP26, Mark Carney put the Glasgow Financial Alliance together, very positive, but there's now a number of the banks looking to pull out of that. So I draw this to your attention to really say that from where I'm standing, I see there's a fall in focus on sustainability. There's a fall in focus on emission reductions. There's a belief in business that we still have time to worry about climate action later. We can kick it down the road. People say to me all the time, this isn't the right time, we'll worry about it later. Yeah, what if there isn't a later, because we've not really taken this as seriously as we could? So I'm going to be asking you guys in a few moments to share your opinions, because it's your voices that matter. And I had held a business event yesterday which involved businesses speaking about their net zero journey. And it's my view that the time of experts sitting in a room and telling us what we should do is over. It's time for businesses to start talking to each other and saying, what can we collectively do as a business community to create a better world and a greener, more resilient future for everyone? So a couple of questions here. I'd like you guys to type into the chat now. Answer one or the other or both, but I want to take your answers to these questions and revisit these towards the end of the session. So whether it's, how do you think the priority has changed within government, investors, and society in general since COP26? And where have you seen sustainability communicated in an honest way, in an authentic way? So really like to see and hear views and voices on that. Just give me a nod, Ray, when I should shift on. So when we talk about sustainability, it typically breaks down into three categories: social, environmental, and economic. And when I put this slide together, I asked myself, what order should I put this in? What should be first? And we wrestle with this. Should it still be profit first and then done in balance with planet and people? Or actually, should it be planet first and then people and profit? Everyone has different views. So I'd also like to ask you guys, I know I'm giving you a lot of work to do, so I apologise for that, but just type in the chat in the order of priority what you think. Is it still profit, people, planet, planet, people, profit? What do you think? It's an interesting way for us to look at how the conversation should evolve. And this translates through into business in terms of environmental, social governance, the measures that we have to see how business aligns with these values. And it is about seeing there are more companies starting to kind of not be so profit-led, but more purpose-led. And we'll be speaking later about 2 or 3 businesses that we can draw attention to that by becoming more purpose-led, they've actually started to attract a new customer base and a new investor base. So we'll explore that later as well. So sustainability is something that affects long-term business success. And the reason I present this is that we have to show this as an opportunity. If it's not regarded as a business opportunity, no one's going to do it. So one of the jobs that we've got to do, and why we do these types of webinars, is to raise awareness that putting sustainability at the front end and at the centre of your values is an opportunity to drive growth in your business, to create a more resilient business that can weather the economic storms and future things like pandemics, to push more innovation through the business and help you be more agile and flexible into what lies ahead. And these are just some of the opportunities. I'm sure, again, if there are other opportunities that I've missed, please put them in the chat. Some of the risks that businesses face are things like supply chain. Extreme weather events are disrupting manufacturing and supply chains. So I think it's important to look at what the risks are, and also in terms of cost. Carbon pricing is on the way and it's going to increase operating cost. And in some ways that's a good thing, because we can no longer have profit at any cost, because that's what caused climate change in the first place. We are going to see more restrictions imposed around the world, implemented to different extents. So these are business risks that have to be acknowledged. Again, anything that I've missed, please add to the chat. Now, by doing this, it's the right thing for people, it's the right thing for planet, but it's also the right thing for your business. So this is a really interesting question. What is a sustainable brand? It means different things to different people. I've got 2 or 3 examples here of brands that I think are sustainable, but I would like to invite you guys in a few moments to put in some brands that you think are sustainable, but I also want you to tell me why. Why are they sustainable? So Unilever's a business. Alan Jopp, the chief executive Unilever, has really put sustainability at the centre of his operation, and it's helping his business and his brand to grow. We're very aware of Patagonia taking the $3 billion of business that they had and putting that into tackling the climate crisis, which is fantastic. Not expecting everyone to do that, but it's a demonstration for us of what is a sustainable, authentic brand. And then an organisation that we're very familiar with at Smurfit Kappa, that have put sustainability at the centre of their business. And as they have achieved reductions in their carbon footprint, they've reduced their water usage, they've reduced their consumption of materials. They've also seen their profits and their EBITDA go up significantly. So there are big brands here that are gaining significant business advantages and growth on the back of doing the right thing. Now, if you wouldn't be, I'd like to hear you guys type in the chat some brands that you're aware of that you respect, and tell us why you respect them. Because it goes back to this conversation today. How do you communicate sustainability in an honest and authentic way? So now we're going to talk about culture, because culture is something that makes or breaks a business. Culture is where your resilience comes from. Businesses asked a lot of their staff through the pandemic, and those businesses with the best cultures were the ones that were able to weather that storm and come through that in a way that they still had an engaged workforce at the end of it. So the purpose of an authentic, positive culture is to create a space that people want to be in, that people want to join, that clients want to work with, that investors want to put money into, and a workforce that genuinely feels empowered and enabled to make a difference. They don't just feel like a number. They feel they've got some level of ownership in what they're doing. So how do you communicate that to your internal workforce? It's not enough just to have an external voice. You need to have an internal one too, so that you bring the workforce on the journey with you. So when it comes to communicating sustainability, the things that we're looking for, and I think there's a key word here, it's authentic. There's a lot of skeptical people out there today that said greenwashing is rife. People are using sustainability to create awareness in their brand. And now it's created apathy in consumers. How do we know this brand is honest and this one isn't? Show me a way to find an authenticity in the voice and in the brand. How do we inform and connect with that audience? If we get it right, if we're authentic, then we will win more customers. We will attract the best talent to join us, and we'll also motivate the workforce that we've got to be fully engaged. Now, this picture here actually is from a fuel change event last year at COP26. We ran the New York Times Challenge, and it was on a campaign to how do we communicate sustainability to young people. And you can see here, Just Don't Do It was their campaign idea around fashion. And we were really impressed with all the teams that took part in that session. So we believe if you empower and engage the next generation, and you give them a platform, they can drive cultural change from the grassroots. And we have seen this time and time again. And there's many organisations we can speak about. We work with Fourth Ports Authority. We're very proud of the young workforce in driving change and creating that collegiate culture with the more experienced members of the workforce. Everyone's in it together, but very often change is driven from the grassroots. Certainly that's what we've seen. So let's talk about how do we bring these forces, converging forces together, where communications and sustainability meet and are underpinned by a positive culture. Well, let's think about the stakeholders. Who do we need to communicate with? So there's a whole bunch of actors we've got to think about. How do we communicate that we're aligned with the direction of our customers? We're aligned with our workforce. We're aligned with our supply chain. We're aligned with our shareholders. Essentially, we need to have a communication mechanism that demonstrates authenticity across all of these actors. And that takes time. There's no shortcuts to this. You have to invest in it. But certainly the organizations that we've seen that have prioritized this are benefiting from it. Their brand stands out, their customers are attracted, and it makes the next generation workforce think, do you know something? You're who I want to work with because I believe in your values. So I'm coming towards the end of the session, and we're very soon going to step into discussion and debate. We want to talk about the role of the young workforce and the impact on brand. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. I recently was putting a challenge together in south of Scotland, a decarbonisation challenge, which was set by South of Scotland Enterprise. And to do that, I had to go and recruit 25 or 30 companies to put their young apprentices into this challenge programme. And what I was able to do, as I said, as each business stepped forward and said, I would like to take part in this programme, I asked them, write me a statement. I believe in this because. So it started with Richie Nichol, who's a Scottish Veterans Entrepreneur of the Year 2022. And he wrote this statement that you see in front of you. And that belief statement that he wrote motivated other businesses to sign up, and it became a community-led initiative. And we got up to 27 businesses within 2 or 3 months had signed up teams, and there was around 100 young people who are taking part in that challenge just now to look at how do we decarbonise forestry and land use, how do we modernise the fashion and textiles industry, how do we modernise and decarbonise from farm to fork in the agriculture sector, how do we decarbonise the construction and housing sector, and then how do we actually tackle the energy crisis itself. These 5 questions are being worked on right now by around 100 young people who are apprentices in businesses in both the public sector and also working in both councils in the public sector. So it all started with one person saying, I believe. And that's a lot of what this is about, an authentic brand. Now, another example of that is a company, an engineering business in Ayrshire called Booth Welsh. We've had 2 or 3 teams through fuel change over the last couple of years, tackling challenges in Grangemouth and the Big Tons Challenge. So they've actually made this a key business initiative that every new member of staff that comes into the business goes through a fuel change challenge. And that's what's helping drive sustainability as a value. So values are what drive the daily behaviours in the business. And it's powerful. And then the third example is we've been working with White and Mackay in Invergordon. They've created a sustainability strategy called the Green Print. And they've actually gone further and they've actually trademarked it. And they're really leading the way up there in Invergordon in trying to be as sustainable as they possibly can. But you're talking about an industry, like many industries, that historically wasn't sustainable. But now, they're trying to modernise and bring new processes and practices into play and going through behavioural change, cultural change, and upgrading the mindset that's needed to create a more green and resilient future. So that's just 3 examples of the impact. But what that does is it makes these organisations authentic because they're investing their time and they're giving licence to their young workforce to take responsibility for decarbonisation and sustainability and drive that across their organisation. So what I'm going to ask you guys is, assuming you like the direction of travel with this conversation, I would like to invite you to sign up to our community, which we'll put in the chat in a minute, or send a question, because at Fuel Change, we look for people to come and work with us as mentors and judges to young people. We've created a climate literacy programme that's now going to be rolled out across all the schools, and it's running across a whole number of schools right now in Scotland. And we bring mentors and judges into the schools to work alongside the students, the next generation, to kind of help ignite their passion for sustainability, so they develop the right behavioural patterns that are needed in these formative years. You know, so we want to get to a point where in the future people think about fossil fuels in the same way many of us today would think about smoking, right? But it took a decade to change that mindset to most people wouldn't accept smoking indoors. Over the next few years, we've got to create that same mindset so people actively seek alternatives to fossil fuels within daily lifestyle. It's not going to be easy. That's why it's a just transition. But if people start to just take one little step, then that will provide an incentive and influence someone else next to them. Everyone can do their bit. So at this stage, I'm going to hand back to you, Fraser, and invite questions and debate, and I'll stop sharing the slides.
Yeah, and do you want to go back to the chat, the questions you initially asked, Gavin?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so Ray, can you post that? I just gave you the questions. Could we get everybody to fill out the answers to those questions? Ray, have you got that?
Just put one in, Fraser.
Aye, smash in now.
The second one in now.
Aye. So if you could pick one of those and put your answer in there as well. Yeah, right. That'd be really helpful. And then we can discuss those. And also, who's got questions? I mean, you know, communication, sustainability, the whole piece is led by people here, right? You know, and you know, I think business owners and you know, we all have a responsibility towards that. Right? So it'd be great to get questions, you know, or statements, or what do you think, and start a little bit of a debate, Gavin. Eh?
Yeah. You know, I want to get right back to the top there. The first question I asked people was to give us a sense of, you know, around sustainability, what people felt was their view. So let me just, there's so many messages here. I'll have to scroll up. So this is great.
Yeah, there wasn't any, nobody had written anything. They hadn't actually put anything in. Ray, can you do the second question, mate? I can't do it. Something wrong with my messaging. It's only letting me message you.
So there was one here from Charles talking about, you know, in terms of the time frame, so how important do people consider sustainability? And he's written Q1, Q2. Charles, why don't you, can you come on and share your thoughts with the group, please? If you're still there, that is. Let's check. Might still not be there. Okay, we'll take it.
So maybe if everybody could take a few minutes and answer one of the questions, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be cool, actually.
Right.
Alexander, you've given us a steer on what you think the balance is around people, planet, profit. Would you mind sharing your views on that? Why?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I've actually got a sort of comment which I wanted to share on that, see if that's useful. Because people have said, and we've said, sustainability is overused. It's almost a dirty word because it's been so overused. But in the people, planet, profit terms, I quite like the idea of using that and framing it in that way, because you can talk about sustainability in each of those perspectives. And I'm even when we order them, it's an issue. I mean, obviously I'll put planet first, but for me, it's about sustainability in planetary terms. So you basically can't mess up your own home. Essentially, that's what we're talking about there. But equally, if you look at people and profit, for me, it's about, well, you need to be sustainable as a company from your employee perspective, of attracting people, avoiding them being burning out and retaining people ultimately, which part of that's that story. But to me, it's all different aspects of sustainability, and profit is just as important. You know, we can risk self-sacrifice of an organisation if we don't actually keep that prominent and important. I guess there's a question about how much, and that's why I don't want to promote Net Zero Nation, but you know, we both work there. But one of the things I do appreciate on Net Zero Nation is companies by guarantee. So it makes it a lot easier on the profit sense. So it's important that it has money to survive, but it's I don't know, the profit motive is much less likely to take over, let's say, because of the structure, because there are no shares. So yeah, for me, that's helpful. So I don't know if there's anything useful in there you wanted to pick up on.
Thanks, Alex. No, that's helpful. I'm just looking back up. I think it's quite interesting to find some brands that you think are sustainable and why. Because it's all about learning. Who's actually getting it right and how are they getting it right? You know. So if I just look at this one here, yeah, Simon, you had named a business that you thought was sustainable. What could you speak to that?
I think I was agreeing with Alex. So it was Alex who mentioned Bertzog in the Netherlands, but it was actually more the kind of business approach they take. So Bertzog is one of, for anybody who may or may not have read a book by Frederic Laloux called Reinventing Organizations. I think we are starting to see a shift in thinking around how business is conducted. So when we talk about engagement, I mean, I'm here today because I'm passionate about sustainability, but I'm also passionate about employee engagement. You know, the traditional hierarchical structures really struggle with enabling change or allowing change to happen at the speed with which society is changing now. So these so-called teal organizations like Bertzog, and it's not just, you know, kind of caring sectors and things like that. It cuts across many, many sectors: manufacturing, education, logistics, you name it. But it really does hard bake employee engagement into the way they conduct business. So they're very purposeful businesses. They're driven by purpose. And these organizations have figured out ways to kind of cut through egos and allow adult conversation and peer-to-peer processes to just get the work done in a very agile, responsive way, which is what we need. But I think what's really interesting is the younger generations are thinking that way, in my experience. And you know, it's us kind of older generations who are having to kind of adapt and think, well, let's find ways of bringing those in, and drive purposeful change in a very organic way. You know, they're living systems, these organizations. So if you haven't read it, Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux, very, very interesting look at new ways of working.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. As part of today's session is about capturing these insights and sharing these reflections. Yeah, because there are best practices. These voices that we're hearing today need to be heard. Does anyone else want to raise a point just now?
Yeah,
sorry, can Charles put that? Sorry.
I was going to. I was
just going to say, could Charles put that in? Right, let me just one question quickly. Charles, can you put that in the chat? Yeah, so everybody can get the book. That'd be brilliant, right? Sorry, Elizabeth.
Great. Thanks.
No, that's fine. Yeah, there were some things. On the chat actually that were saying we need new sustainability standards, and that is actually what Emmanuel Faber is doing now, the ex-CEO of Danone, who had a really horrible exit from Danone because he wanted to prioritize ESG issues. Yeah. And what's really interesting about what they're doing with the International Sustainability Standards Board is that they're going to be linking up, I can't remember what the acronym is, but the main accounting system, the FIFS or something. I'm not an accountant, so sorry about that. But the one that the world uses, and that is expected to come in in this next 12 months. So that's really exciting. I find this so fascinating because I would say I spend a lot of my time feeling very discombobulated between, I'm in business. I happen to be in solar energy, so I'm very much at the front end of trying to remove the need for fossil fuels. And I really hear that we have had 100 years of profit first mentality. It seems on the basis of one man, we still cling to this idea of, the social responsibility of a business is money for shareholders. And what I find really hard to understand is that this is so entrenched. Yet that was right for 1940, right? And the world has completely changed. But what it comes down to is really not understanding the climate impacts. Like, it's really hard to even understand. I mean, I haven't been to Pakistan, but their present is our future. Before this year, I would have never thought that we would be dealing with wildfires. If anything, we're probably quite a temperate climate.
Yeah.
But because our global, anyway, so I guess my main point around business and sustainability, the UN have just brought in a greenwashing arm or radar arm. They've got an unspeakable name in the sense of it's such a long, very UN name that nobody can say, but they are definitely trying to address the greenwashing claims. And there's been some really big sessions recently, haven't there, with HSBC and H&M being told by the advertising watchdog that they can't carry on with their claims. So I think we do have to look at ESG in what I would call 2.0 and know that this, there's greenwashing on one side, there's still a lot of climate denial on the other side. But I think for the businesses who increasingly do the right thing Kappa, you said, like they will get the benefits because you will pierce through. So that would be my thing. My point is that it is just worth doing the right thing, because now, especially in the energy sector where I am, saving money and decarbonizing is one and the same thing, because solar is so much cheaper.
That's so true. One of the reasons why I came up with this theme, Elizabeth, on this was a year ago I was asked to do a talk to some students, Edinburgh University Marketing Society. And it was at that time I realised, sustainability and marketing are kind of really interlinked. That by doing good things and telling the world about it in an authentic way, it's going to attract people to your brand. And so it comes back to what you're saying there, that you basically have to see this as an opportunity. So at a business event I was at yesterday, one of the companies stood up and said, we're a small business, we've got 5 staff, right? We don't need to have gone and got our carbon accounts in place today because there's no legislation forcing us to do it, but we've done it anyway. And do you know what that's helped us to achieve? When we've gone out and talked to international clients and they've said, what do you do? And they said, well, we have this great energy saving device for large scale energy assets. They said, well, we've already got 3 suppliers that do that. And they've turned around and said, aye, but have any of them got their audited carbon accounts? And they've said, we'll check, we'll get back to you. They got back to them and said, no, they haven't, let's talk. So by putting sustainability at the front end, it allows you to have an entirely different conversation with a business. So it totally aligns with what you were saying there, Elizabeth. So thanks for sharing that. Does anyone else have any views they'd like to share just now?
There's lots in the comments.
Okay, let's pick another one then.
Gavin, would you like me to come in on communication?
Please, David. Yes.
I'm feeling that I don't want to be doing a pitch, but I'm listening to what everybody says. Yeah, I listen to the comment. Doing the right thing will come. Any business doing the right thing will come through. I'm challenging it. Any business that gets the communication right, whether they're doing it right or not, are the ones that are going to come through. You've mentioned the exception to the rule when you can actually get in conversation with someone. And like you said about the audited carbon, great. If you've got to that point where you can have the conversation, use it. But you shouldn't have to be. You should get your communication right so those companies are coming to you. There's the issue. Everybody's got a story. Everybody wants to talk, but nobody's putting the efforts or funding into communicating the story.
That's a great, it's a great
correctly.
correctly, but it comes back down to the actions that they're taking have to be authentic. So how do you
Yes.
how do you demonstrate authentic action, David?
I've perhaps not got the answer to demonstrating it, but I was scribbling notes there. I mean, what a few people on the call will know, I'm a publisher and I publish digital magazines. We have a social impact magazine. Gavin knows it because we interviewed you and we did a piece, and I'll be happy to send it to everybody. Give me a minute and I'll put the link in. If I'm publishing content, I would want to find a group of bodies. It could include yourselves, Net Zero. It could include a couple of other people, maybe the people who are doing the audits. And each time we've got a piece of communication that we've been asked to put out, or somebody's asked us, you know, will you put this out? Then, yeah, I'd love to get that pre-approval. I'd love to have our own publisher's charter. And I can say, it's not going in that magazine unless it's authentic. Happy to do it. Happy to work with all your members.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate that. And as I said, that's one of the reasons why we create this Fuel Change community, where people can basically share insights and have a wall, an area where they can put their ideas out there. So thank you. If you've got your contact details, put that in the chat.
Yeah, we'll do.
Sign up to the community and by all means invite people to have that conversation, because that's what it's there for.
Okay. Cheers.
Anthony's got a question, Gavin.
Okay, Anthony.
Thank you both. I suppose less of a question, but so I work within the forestry sector. We have multiple and numerous people coming to us on a daily or even weekly basis to say we are interested in offsetting our carbon. We're interested in making our business environmentally sustainable and investing into public good. I don't believe we have an investment crisis in a lack of investment available. But what we have is a significant crisis in how we channel that investment into adequate, appropriate, non-greenwashing, either decarbonisation or environmental social good schemes. So for instance, Energy Warehouse have done something very interesting with an organisation called Stump Up the Trees in South Wales. And they actually haven't bought the carbon out of that. What they've done is supported a project to create forestry, to give back to farmers and to the local community. And they are taking the environmental social good. But we have a fundamental problem, which is land use change, which is the appetite for investors to buy land and control, to manage and have possession of that land. And when you look at that versus communities, when you look at versus farming businesses, that appetite it's not matched. It's absolutely not matched. And in which case it's very disparate. We have no relationship where people are prepared to partner. And it is that co-partnering that we need if we're going to see people seek to engage appropriately with land use change and decarbonisation. I would hasten to say that actually we need all businesses to be credibly saying we have reduced our emissions, we have sought to improve our operational programme, either through green energy or through using lower carbon materials, but there is a role for things like afforestation or land use change. But at the moment, no one is prepared to bite down and accept that it's a lower yield as well. And I think until we start to really value and communicate, as David was saying, about the positive outcomes, whether they be social, whether they be corporate, and in fact, whether they even be industrialized material supply, like timber, will allow us to go on and do other greater things, we are fundamentally not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's the Scottish Government Climate Emergency Response Group published a report in August this year, and they came up with 4 recommendations on the subject of how do we start to drive the decarbonisation agenda into businesses and society. And one of the things they came up with is a thing called a net zero test policy. So just if you stick with that for a minute, Anthony, so you're like, okay, so you're going to go into an investment class. So what test does it have to pass, right? And who validates it? So in the case of the net zero test policy, what's not been defined is what's the definition of passing the test, right? So if you give someone a calculator and say that you go fill out your carbon benchmark yourself, first of all, they might not have enough education to know what to key in the first place. Secondly, they might type in the wrong information. And thirdly, who's to say what they're saying is right or true? So we need to get to a point where there's a standard that everyone has to adhere to, right? And a regulation. And that has to underpin what's going on, whether it's in the financial or the investment sector. If you're going out to apply to a public or a private procurement situation, there needs to be criteria. Just like we're seeing tenders now, sustainability is a higher percentage of the score. But I think what you're talking about there is we need to bring more consistent standards into how decisions are being taken. And we need a way to separate people who are genuinely authentic from those that are greenwashing. And that can only come from evidence. There's no other way. Independent validation. So that's a key thing for us, is making sure that there's evidence and it's authentic. So thanks for sharing that with us, Anthony. Appreciate that.
Can I ask, Anthony, so that sounds like what the work that you're doing is offsetting, or potentially, for businesses. So is there not a way to fund that through people who can only reach their net zero targets through offsetting? Because I don't fully believe a lot of the offsetting, because it's hard to determine, how are they offsetting it? Is it, and too much offsetting is maybe a bad thing too. But it sounds like what you're doing is genuine offsetting. So isn't there a way to channel people, businesses and funds towards that to make up the difference in the revenue that they're going to feel that they're losing?
Absolutely, there is. I mean, I think so. In terms of, I work for an organisation called Convergence, Confederation of Forest Industries. We're a seed to sawmill organisation. So actually, I don't help people offset. What I help people do is I help our members create woodland, manage woodlands, and part of that is people come in and seek to invest. Now, in terms of forestry, there's something called a woodland carbon code. It's an accredited, measured, appropriate system that gives a genuine carbon certificate that's verified. But there are fundamental challenges that, yes, that's a great way of offsetting, but that doesn't stop people greenwashing, which is what Gavin's just highlighted. But the other side to that is, yes, it is a great way of offsetting carbon, but it's not a great way of supporting communities, society, and those who are current land users to stay in their local communities. So then you end up with this very fractious relationship between those who are embedded in the landscape, in the community and the culture, and those who want to invest in their land.
I think Anthony's dog's taking.
Someone got attacked by a dog, yeah. That's worse than children, yeah. Excellent.
So guys, we're at that kind of 45-minute mark now. In respecting everyone's time, if anyone wants to drop off now, that's fine. We're going to keep this running for a bit longer if anyone wants to continue the conversation, but just want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at that 45-minute. The last time we did this, we got to the 45-minute mark and everyone wanted to continue the conversation. So that's why this time round I'm actually saying, if you guys want to continue, love to continue having this conversation for 10-15 minutes, so thank you. Otherwise, if you do have to drop off, please do drop over to the community, sign up and start adding your voice to the conversation. Yeah, and we'll get back in touch. Yeah.
And the communities, Gavin, do you want to tell everybody about the community, what that's going to look like?
Yeah, that Fuel Change community is something that we've had over 1,500 members of the young workforce have been through this challenge process. We've run 15 challenges in the last 2 years, working with about 115 companies, apprentices. And that's about driving cultural change and mindset from the grassroots. And what we realised, we run these 16-week challenges, and at the end we realised we need to give these people somewhere to go at the end of that process. But similarly, we have a lot of mentors and judges who volunteer time to support these people. So we needed to give that group as well an opportunity to stay involved. So that Fuel Change community is a place where people converge to communicate and share ideas. And we're running challenges, probably 2-3 challenges a year. And it's about connecting business with the next generation workforce to tackle sustainability together. And it's proved to be really effective. So that's what the community is doing, and we're going to be investing much more energy in it. We're actually running an event next week at Dynamic Earth in Edinburgh. We've got around 200 people coming to that, which is a really big mixture of, there's about 40 or 50 students and from schools. So we've got nearly every school in Scotland represented, taking part in a one-day decarbonisation challenge set by Scottish Water, with a number of people mentoring and supporting those students on the day. We've got 7 companies, apprentices, presenting their previous decarbonisation solutions. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff, and it's all shared in that community space, Fraser. So
cool, right? So, and that's a voice for you as well, right? The voice for everybody. Yeah. So it's not just a one-way thing. It's the idea is the same as today. Everybody's communicating with each other and sharing ideas, collaborating, and helping each other. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, does anybody have any questions for Gavin? Gavin Bergener, you look very thoughtful there, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot. I'm taking everything in that you're saying, and really, I've spoken to Gavin Tweedy before about this. I'm trying to go right back to where this all stems to. Like net zero for me means, we've got to switch off from oil and gas. That seems to be the priority. We're trying to save ourselves and the environment and the ecosystems. We need to switch off from oil and gas. We can't do that right now. Even if we went to the government and we said, just close them all down, like we can go in and just shut them all down. We couldn't do that. Things would be worse off than than before. So it's trying to replace that. And I'm a geologist and I work in the mining industry, and it's always a bit of a conflict with the environmental movement and the climate change movement. You're into mining, but it's very difficult to try and say we're going to mine ourselves out of a problem. But if we are solely focusing on net zero, our goal is to reduce the amount of carbon emissions. So if we can go all electric and solar power and hydrogen, all that, if we can do that, let's do that. But it's going to require a huge amount more resources. Like just cars alone, like if we were to get rid of all the diesel burners and just go for electric, we're going to need to find, we have about 20% of the amount of lithium identified. That's just cars, and cars only account for less than 10% of the amount of lithium that we'd be using. You're talking about all the planes, you're talking about all the cargo ships, everything. You need a massive paradigm shift in the earth, really, to reduce and for us to turn down everything. And I'm sort of thinking, that ultimately we have to, the paradigm shift is just putting that pressure, the pressure that we put on ourselves and the earth for our needs and to basically keep us content. We have to switch that all down, everything down. Where we go, every time we go somewhere, we're putting pressure. Every time we want something, it's pressure, and that's what's causing this.
It's interesting to say, Gavin. It's like my friend James Napier often says the cheapest kilowatt is a kilowatt you don't burn. Yeah. Right. And that's something we can all learn from. Certainly, since I put a smart meter in my home, I've paid a hell of a lot more attention to what I'm doing. Thinking, my son having a 25-minute shower, that's not okay. There's a timer in the shower now, he gets 5 minutes. It's things, right? But it's like, these are small changes. And actually, they're talking about this year, there's going to be blackouts. We're going to have to get used to this idea. There could be a couple of hours of the day through the winter where we don't have energy. So they're saying conserve. So it goes back to having practices that are trying to reduce responsibly where you can, but it is about a just transition. You can't switch it off overnight. That's why we've got these targets to be net zero by 2030 or 2045. But we have to start it now. We can't keep kicking it down the road. It has to start.
We can't turn it off overnight, but we could start to move all of the investments out of unsustainable to sustainable energy. We don't have an energy crisis. We have an investment crisis. And that's most likely, propped up by the oil and gas industry to prevent people from taking their money out. I don't believe the recent hikes in prices, the only reason they wanted them to benefit the shareholders was that it would stop the shareholders taking their money out of unsustainable investments into sustainable investments. So I think when that shifts, and we're getting really close to that, because the pensions industry and particularly councils and governments who have 0.5 trillion invested in invested in investments are, you know, on the brink. And when that domino falls, then there's going to be a lot more shift towards sustainability.
You're absolutely right, Michael. Demand has to change, and it has to come from the public and the private sector. Completely agree, Michael. Great point. Anyone else like to make any other observations or remarks?
How you doing? It's Alan. Talking refrigeration. The problem I've got is listening to David about communication and how we need to change. And I've started my career in 1990. We've in the refrigeration business. It's always been about ozone depleting and global warming with our refrigerants. And for the whole of my career, we've got away with, we've got rid of all the ozone depleting gases. We're now trying to reduce the global warming potential on the refrigerants, and we're doing fine. We're getting there. We've just since 2020, we're now underneath the 2000 global warming potential. The problem I've got with net zero is I've just worked 6 months on a quote with a customer to try and for his company to go net zero and put in a CO2 plant. So you've got the option, say that this company could spend £150,000 on a refrigeration plant with a global warming potential of less than 2000, which still meets all the criteria, or they could go for a CO2 plant, which is net zero, but it costs £350,000. The problem that I've got is, how can you sell a customer when we're in kind of problem with money just now and the way the country is, when the stuff you've got to buy to become net zero costs you 3 to 4 times as much? That's the problem that I'm finding to try and look at it. And you know, customers are turning and going, the idea, this is fantastic, want to go net zero. How much? You don't have that money.
Do you know what? It's a great point, Alan, but I think in some ways in this country we're ahead of a lot of other countries in the world, that funding is being made available through Scottish Government, the Scottish Enterprise, to subsidise its schemes. There's manufacturing net zero grant. There's a whole bunch of grants I can direct you to after this call, right? That specifically exist as much as 50% of those costs, and it's designed to ease that just transition, so there becomes more demand for the solutions that you want to sell and less demand for the ones you don't.
My customer went down the road of going for a grant, being knocked back. He thought he would get a grant to help him out to go net zero or start that working, but because the food that he was supplying didn't get the correct criteria for this year, he get knocked back for it, which is fine for him. He just goes for the cheaper option. But you know, from a point of view from my business, I've just wasted 6 months.
Yeah.
Can I just talk about that, though, Alan, from a sales point of view? Sorry, Mike and Gavin, if that's all right. When you're selling, you know, it's about how you frame it. It's about how you navigate through that journey with the client. It's about who you talk to. It's how you position it. And so percentage people are never going to buy from you. You're right, you know, at a price point, you know, like that. But people do spend a lot of money on good quality things that serve a purpose in a specific way. And it's easier to sell the high cost things and the best stuff than it is to sell the cheap things, right? There's no doubt about that. You know, but it's about our framing, our mindset. It's about how we engage with the marketplace. It's about what message we're putting out there. It's about the community. And I do think that people will do it, but there's a move towards that. And if you get that model right, the opportunity will be there where they will buy this stuff, right? You know, some clients will buy it if they, you know, and some of them have the money to do it and some don't. And you sort of move, as you move, you'll get more and more and more traction. You know? So.
I just think there's a couple of customers have been CO2, but it's now the smaller companies that are kind of getting. It's just difficult for them just now to try to generate that money. So it's just get a balance. How we
it is, definitely
the transformation, how we get from there to there, and until the prices come down on the plant, you're going to waste a lot of time as well. And it's all right to communicate, saying it's great to go forward, but there's also obviously the price, the cost implication as well.
Yeah, but you can't win them all. But there is a marketplace there, and so you focus on that market. Yeah, so you know, it's you know.
I think one learning from this, I don't think we capture all the failed bids, and I think maybe there's a forum needed for this. Could be in the net zero community or similar, but everyone who's submitting an application and it's not getting put through, Let's capture all those, because do you know something? They all fall through the net, and because nobody sees it, nobody knows there's a problem. So, Alan, that example and others, it'd be great if there was a way for us to say, right, let's find a platform that capture all this stuff, and then we'll bring it and we'll put it in front of the policymakers. We do have those regular conversations, and let's sort of say, look, you need to change your policies, or you need to upgrade your policies to recognise a lot of very worthwhile projects are not getting through because you've got the wrong priority and the wrong criteria. That policy exists to serve the right objectives. So let's connect that. So maybe one takeaway from this today is to say, where you've had an application that you felt was genuinely worthy, let's capture that somewhere. And so let's keep that conversation going after today. But I'd love to chat with all of you. I'm available. Reach out to me. Let's have conversations. Let's keep it going.
Can I just chip in there for Alan? The thing is that that extra cost could be offset in another way. That company should be using the money that they're spending as a promotional device to say, look at us, look what we're doing, and working with their PR, marketing, whoever. This is what I'm suggesting about, you know, there needs to be more communication about the companies who are willing to bravely take on that challenge, because actually they're seeing that as a cost, an additional cost, where, you know, every company needs to provide a story about, you know, where they are in this journey. And if they were to make that part of their, I don't know what this company is, if they're retail or something like that, but if they're willing to, you know, actually say, you know, an example of this would be, you know, Barclays about 8 or 9 years ago, we're looking at did a very niche thing for the blind community, where you could plug in your headset into the cash machines and use their cash machines. And this is similar to say, like, there's actually a really important story to be told there. And if that company, if you had the support of the right communications and PR companies, say, actually make this part of your marketing campaign, your PR campaign, because they cost a lot more money than this 3 times, 4 times. The return on that investment could be much more significant and get them over that hurdle of spending the money to do that. There's, you know, I guess that's a tricky one, but you know.
I went down the road. I was trying to say to him, he would maybe. I think what the likes of your bigger retail food companies are doing just now is, I think one of the large retail companies are trying to push smaller companies that supply them to go net zero. I think one of the companies have given them a deadline by such and such a year, so that's why I had to look into it to try and sell it to these larger retail companies that we are going down that road. But he's got to kind of get the balance right between, is it going, am I going to get business off this company? It's the same as any business. He's looking at the kind of figures. He's not ruled it out for future, because obviously he's got to change out his refrigerant at some point, his units at some point, but just now he just doesn't have the cash. So he's going to try again, possibly in a year's time, to get another grant. And that's just a small food company.
But let's figure out a way, guys, collectively start capturing this seriously, right? And let's turn this.
I mean, that's just a small example of what I see in my business going forward. The troubles that I'm going to find to try and go net zero.
Yeah, great.
It's definitely an issue, Alan, and I think there's a few different ways of approaching it, like Michael saying, like Gavin saying. And I think if we come together as a group, then you all share ideas, and actually you can create changes and reframe how we think, reframe how other people think, and that's the opportunity here, isn't it? So, anyway, Gavin, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, no. So I think it's fantastic. There's still 26 people here, right? 15 minutes later. Fantastic. I mean, that's a sign of a good session. We had some 52 people join us through the session, so that's great. We had over 260 people register, so a lot of folks said, I can't make it, send me the recording. There's a huge interest and enthusiasm for this subject, so we're going to keep having these types of conversations with slightly different themes, but let's just make sure everyone's voice here gets heard. That's the important part of doing this. So thanks all for coming along. Really appreciate it. Please do come in and join the community and add your voice to it, and look forward to catching up with you all again soon. Join me in LinkedIn as well if you want to have a chat one-to-one there as well.
Aye, perfect. Thank you, everyone.
I noticed Carrie Lomas has just disowned me. She's put in the chat, we are not related. Carrie, you don't know that.
Right, thanks everyone.
Gavin Fraser Ray, I'd love to talk to all of you. Just a quick point. We've got the magazine, which is the central point that every company that are involved in wanting to communicate the message can be in one place, one independent place. Secondly, at my